Good afternoon, dear colleagues, friends. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. Thank you very much for coming in time, and we also start in time. And in order to think about the words that we heard during the panel session, we decided to have small time out, and I will represent our panel, and I will be a moderator today. So when we speak about plenary session, it's for me, it's very important to say that our session is one of the main, and because priority was to work with World Trade Organization, and our topic is similar, and during the plenary session, it was a it was said that our session is very important because it's very important for partners, for economy of Uzbekistan, for Uzbekistan's partners, and we will speak about small and medium enterprises and business. And we will start in a couple of minutes, and this is what occurred to me when I was listening to Mr. President of Republic of Uzbekistan, when I was listening to the speakers, and we have a lot of interesting topics. Yes, we have a couple of minutes, and I would like to suggest to you to use headphones for having simultaneous translation. First channel is Russian, second is English, null is Uzbek, and we will have international panel. We will speak in all possible languages, and I will try to speak Russian and English. Maybe I will start speaking Uzbek, but if I start speaking Uzbek, you will not understand me. So my colleagues will speak in both in English and Russian. So and we are going to we're giving to all the speakers, to each speaker we're having we're giving 10 minutes. After that we'll have discussion and question and answers panel, and maybe we'll have discussions during the presentations. Maybe I will ask some questions. I will be here, and so I think we can probably start, if you don't mind. So now let me introduce myself. My name is Sergey Sanokin. I'm the moderator of this session. I am working head of BBC World News in Eurasia and in Uzbekistan. So I am working with Uzbekistan from professional perspective, and I like this very much from professional and personal perspective. And during the plenary session, we were speaking a lot about that. And I can confirm that our people are very important, and the topic of is called trade finance, but nevertheless we will full title of topic is modern tools for financing of trade and look into the future. And I'm very glad that we have a lot of experts from and professionals, and I would like to introduce Mr. Barry Rogers. He's the founder and CEO of Convenient Capital Company. And second will be Martin Goroshal, who is a Vice President of Citibank from the United Kingdom. Then we will have Ekaterina Golitsina, Director and Head of SCIS region. KfW IPEX Bank from Germany, and after that we will have Sardor Khalmakhadov, Executive Director, Structured Trade and Export Finance, Helabal Bank Hessen from Germany. After that we will have Nazim Nurdalim, Chief Operating Officer, Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, Saudi Arabia. And after that, we will have Kudrat Salat Laganov, Chairman of the Board of Asaka Bank from Uzbekistan. Thank you very much, dear speakers, for your participation here, and thanks to all who are with us on our session, to those who are here, and I believe that our session is the main because we are speaking about priority of Uzbekistan in order to enter World Trade Organization, and of course we will be speaking about financing, about small and medium enterprises and how to finance trade of small and medium business, and we will speak about export, of course. We will speak about numbers, $1.7 trillion of unfunded financing, so there are in the world, and 40% out of this are small and medium business. And what can we do in order to help small and medium business in Uzbekistan? And we will speak about this, and we'll speak about restoring trade and enhancing and facilitating trade. And now I'd like to give the floor to Barry Rogers, founder and CEO of Convenient Capital.
Participate in this panel. I'm quite a regular visitor to Tashkent, about every 8 weeks. I'm based in London. And I think Uzbekistan, in my opinion, is one of the most exciting developing countries in the world. And I kind of don't say that lightly. It's really good to see some of the changes that were announced, I think, this morning by the President, I may be wrong, with regards to import-exporting and the tax breaks and the reduction in corporation tax and the VAT reduction. These are all very welcome things. Unfortunately, the UK seems to be going in the opposite direction. They've increased corporation tax from 19 to 26. And God knows what other things they've done. So I think the Uzbek government have a really fantastic, positive attitude to doing business here. Anyway, let's turn to the subject matter. I've kind of been asked to talk to you about the trade finance marketplace in general, banks versus other funding routes. I'm going to try and not be too controversial, okay? So we have the banks. The banks are the banks. And what would we do without our friends at the banks? And they provide a massive service to the trade finance sector. Of course they do. And they will continue to do so. But there is another life apart from bank financing. And the alternative to banks, let's just call it the alternative finance marketplace. And this is a combination of many different types of funders. I think, just going back to the banks slightly, I think the banks provide funding across the whole piece, both small and large transactions. But most of the very large commodity transactions are financed by banks, I think is true to say. When it comes to, let's say, the smaller transactions, okay, what's small? Well, let's just say up to $20 million. It's very subjective. There's an emerging alternative finance sector, which really is where I work. Trade receivables of trade finance is a lot more than just trade receivables. Trade receivables is the way you get your money back. It's the exit route, if you like, or one of the exit routes. So trade receivables as an asset class is very much a growing space. And trade receivables as an asset class has many fantastic attributes, and I probably don't have to sit here and tell you what they are. You probably know what they are yourself. If an investor invests in real estate, he may well tie up his money for some considerable time. And the asset, the property may increase or decrease in value. The money's locked in, and it may be a year or several years before the investor can realize their profit. With trade receivables, it's completely the opposite. They turn their investment over 4 to 6 times a year. They can take their profit 4 to 6 times a year. The return on capital is double digits. It's very attractive. Credit insurance can mitigate the risk. There's no valuations involved. A trade receivable payment obligation doesn't change in value. The only exposure one might have would be to the foreign exchange differences. So the alternative finance sector really is made up, and as I say, it's a growing space, made up of private debt funds, hedge funds, family offices, high net worth people, ultra high net worth people, and trade finance companies. So there's a whole myriad of different funders, and they all have a massive appetite. The difficulty, I suppose, one weakness of the alternative finance sector is they don't have the very deep pockets like banks do. They're usually quite happy to fund up to, let's say, 5 or 10 million per transaction, maybe in some cases a bit higher, whereas the banks really do have the resources to fund much larger transactions. As Sergey mentioned, and it's kind of fairly well documented, that the missing funding gap in trade finance is like 1.7 trillion. I think it's probably nearer to 2 and probably growing. COVID didn't do much for anybody, of course it didn't, but during this period, probably leading up to COVID, there were some huge frauds. And let's remember, the biggest threat to trade finance is fraud. The banks are exposed to fraud just like anyone else. But I think fraud is more of an enemy to the alternative finance sector for one reason. Generally, and my colleagues here may correct me if I'm mistaken, is that most of the bank funding of trade finance is on a relationship basis, where they know their customer and they have a relationship with the customer. And the propensity or the opportunity for fraud is very much diminished, in my opinion. The alternative finance sector is very different. It usually isn't relationship funding. It's usually transactional funding, where the private debt fund or the high net worth person or the trade finance company is offered a transaction to finance, and it could be just a one-off. And the propensity for fraud there is extraordinarily high. So, you have to put the proper processes and procedures in place to mitigate this. That's an obvious thing to say, I know. But with we're talking about the future of trade finance here today. The future, of course, you couldn't talk about the future of trade finance without mentioning digitalization. I always stumble with that word, I don't know why. Digitalization. And digitalization, like any technology, is an emerging new area. Digitalization's been around for, 10 years or so. It's nothing new in itself. But when you start digitalizing bills of lading and shipping documents, this is new. And the UK recently has passed a law around the digitalization of shipping documents, very much at the behest of ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, which is a wonderful organization, and they really do promote the progressive nature of trade finance, not just at importer-exporter level, but at government level. It's fantastic what they've done. So bearing in mind what I said a short while ago, that fraud is the biggest enemy, digitalization, can increase the exposure to fraud. So it's a wonderful, moving, progressive step, but one that needs to be taken cautiously and prudently, in my opinion. Whatever methodology you use, whether it's traditional financing techniques or digitalization, and usually you find it's a mixture of both, it has to be underpinned by strong processes, policies and procedures. And if any trading company or if any financier, whether it's a private debt fund or investment vehicle or a bank, then you need these processes, policies, procedures as your template. Of course, the banks must have these, and they do have them. Of course, they do. But with the changing regulatory capital and different issues that the banks have to follow nowadays, these are very important things to have. I mean, fortunately, the alternative finance sector usually is usually an unregulated sector. There isn't minimum capital requirements and so forth. But nevertheless, the policies, processes and procedures underpin everything. You must know everything about your risk, because really what you don't know, you can't manage. But trade finance is a very exciting space to be in. It's become more difficult post-COVID. I think the number of players has diminished. Obviously, the cost of capital in the last 6 months has increased by 5 or 6%. But unfortunately, borrowers still have the mentality that it's still 2% cost, whereas now it's 5 or 6% cost, and that's just the base rate. I suppose the biggest challenge for borrowers outside of the banks generally by nature are generally less expensive. The risk may be better, the profile, the relationship is well known. The rates are probably less than the alternative finance sector. And that's the challenge, particularly around commodities. Commodity margins are usually, I'm not an expert on commodities, by the way, but commodity margins are usually a lot less than, say, finished goods. And therefore, the alternative finance market funders generally can be too expensive for commodity financiers. Because as we speak today, the alternative finance lenders are usually looking for double-digit costs, 12, 13%, sometimes higher, and this really isn't, this is too expensive for the commodity trade. But they're increasingly, the alternative finance space is increasingly going to become, or is becoming, a major financier.
Okay, thank you, Barry. I think we can talk later at the end. Actually, the issue of fraud, which you mentioned, I think it's unexpected for everybody, but then probably at the end we'll be talking about reputation, because digitalization is not helping, and so for borrower, what to do, how to reduce, basically, to improve perception of the company, and then we'll be talking about reputation. And it's not very often we're talking about this when we're talking about trade finance. May I pass floor to the next speaker, to Martin Groschel, Vice President, Citibank Europe from United Kingdom.
Hi, my name is Martin Groschel. I'm covering trade in Citibank. I've been working for this industry more than 20 years, in Citibank more than 10 years. It's a great pleasure to be here in this lovely city and this lovely event. So let's kick this off. I will start with a general overview where we stand right now in a trade finance, or what is the current situation. If you look at the market, we are living in unprecedented times, to be honest. We had a pandemic situation last 3 years. Now we are living in a huge inflation. Central banks started to increase the interest rates. For example, in 2022, there was the biggest increase of cost of capital for last 40 years. So there is a huge impact of the company how to fund their needs, especially trade finance needs. Then we have sanctions. Sanction is also very, very big topic for the corporates, not only the corporates, but also for the bank, because we have to deal with the delays of execution of the deals, and it's also not helping the trade and the business at all. Finally, what is very significant is the disruption of the supply chain. There was a survey in the US that, for example, the biggest 3,000 corporates mentioned that 44% of all CFO of these companies said that they are very concerned of disruption of the supply chain. It means that situation is still not recovered after COVID, and this leads to the increased cost of inventories. It means that companies need to finance inventories, their stocks. There's also the big impact on their cash flow, working capital, and in general, the companies have a couple of options how to solve this problem. On the one side, they can take a loan, they can take a bond, or bring it through equity, but the companies or CFO starting to play also with the balance sheet, for example, receivables, payables, trying to extend the payment terms towards the payables, towards the suppliers, trying to sell the receivables, trying to sell the portfolios of receivables. This is the space where we see the potential as a bank, and also its potential for trade finance at all. I'm not sure how big is developed this area in Uzbekistan, but definitely this is the future for this region, and I would like to highlight this kind of products. If we're talking about the supply chain finance, this is the great product, how you can very easily improve your cash flow, how you can improve your working capital through extending the payment terms towards your suppliers. It's a win-win position for both parties, because you can very easily to boost your working capital, and on the side, the suppliers are getting the liquidity very quickly. They're doing it on a non-recourse basis, and in majority cases, the financing is more cheaper than what they have in the current financing. If you look at the other side of the working capital is the receivables. Here is also a couple of structures where we see the potential. The companies can sell the receivables bilaterally if they have one, two big buyers. But very popular these days also the portfolio financing, means to sell all the portfolio. We are doing synthetic securitization, means we are looking at the old portfolio. There is a couple of tranches, first loss tranche, mezzanine tranche, and senior tranche. This is also the options how can company very easily boost the working capital and how to get the money from these receivables. Plus, they also improving the distribution chain because through the extended payment terms of the receivables, the small entities, in the end, they have also space to grow. If we look at the trends in the trade finance in the near future, I think we all agree that digitalization is the key. I'm not telling only just digital signature, but also the comprehensive structure in terms of financing the whole ecosystem around the receivables, payables. If you look at the core trade like letter of credit, bank guarantees, collections, I think there is a couple of solutions, applications where the banks have a direct connection with the client, not just only have a secure channel how to communicate with the client, but very complex system where the system is connected with the core system of the bank. And if the client uploading the data about the, I don't know, LC or SBLC, it's directly connected with the core system and there is a mitigation of the touch points. If you look at the receivable structure or payable structure, we see the very popular these days is building the ecosystems. On the payable side is to look not only just for the payables, but started with the procurement phase, I mean pre-shipment phase, where the bank can help also the SME clients to pre-finance the pre-shipment phase. This pre-shipment phase will be liquidated through supply chain finance, and all this channel is covered by one type of financing. We see on the market a lot of fintech companies which are focusing on these platforms and systems, and they are doing in the way just originate and distribute. They just provide a platform, and there is either self-financing or some third-party financing, and the company is just to have a platform where the demand and where is the connection between offer and demand. So this is the future from our perspective, and we see these platforms going forward very well. Finally, what we see is also blockchain technology. As colleague said, we see these platforms in core trade like documentary business, letter of credits. There are a couple of live products on the market. We are also part of one of it. I would say it's a great idea. The most important thing here is to have all parties involved in one particular project, means banks, shippers, traders, and all involved companies to have one ecosystem. Documents are shared through the platform, blockchain platform. I think it should work. At the end of the day, my expectation is that we will have, I don't know, 1 to 3 maximum these platforms, because it makes sense only if it's 1 or 2 very unique closed system. Come back to the Uzbekistan, where we see the potential on this market. As I mentioned here, in Uzbekistan, we see a lot of opportunities. It's an emerging market for, I think, all banks, not only local, but also for global banks. We see the potential in the core business, like letter of credits. A lot of companies using the UPA structure, means there's the pre-shipment phase or issuing phase, and also the advancing the funds during the life cycle of the LC. We also see a lot of trade advances to commercial banks, where the commercial banks need funding for financing the trade flows. And the third biggest opportunity is, from my perspective, ECA financing. This is the key, how to support the local corporates in terms of long-term financing, how to get the money for, I don't know, 7, 10, 15 years. This is the key here. How to support the SMEs. I think in this role or in this area, the critical element is maybe local governments, schemes, special funds schemes, multilaterals. The bank needs to have a coverage for risks, and we are ready to provide also financing for more risky business, but there needs to be some kind of coverage from this kind of institution. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. You mentioned word coverage, and do you mean that these institutions should make sure that every SMEs, they know about products available? Or you mean something else when you say the coverage? It's very media term, coverage.
Yeah,
And I agree with you,
I mean,
but just I'd
it's
like...
a kind of form of guarantee, how to...
All right, I see coverage, it's a financial term. You mean, because what I wanted to mention that very often banks are providing beautiful and well-designed products, but SMEs, they're not aware. And even if you work hard and you prepared your proposal, but this proposal is not known in the market.
I can give you one great example for how to support the SMEs. If you have a big corporate in a country and you structure the supply chain finance program very well, you can very easily support also the supply chain, which is in majority cases the SME business, and they can get the access to the very cheap funding because the price of the supply chain finance is majority based on the risk of the buyer, which is in majority cases great. And we had the one case where the rating of one SME is improved by 2 notches during the 1-2 years, only due to the fact that they're selling their receivables, they're transferring the receivables into the cash, and based on the engine, on the risk model of the bank, they improve the rating profile. So this is also the way how can support the SMEs.
Okay, so you offer many ways, and you see potential. This is the most important thing. Your last point, potential in Uzbekistan. Yeah. Right, we're moving forward, and Екатерина Голицына, this is our next speaker. Директор Екатерина Голицына будет нашим следующим спикером. Екатерина, директор.
She is director of head of sales region, KfW Bank, IPEX, from Germany.
Thank you very much for the This is our mandate to support the European and the German exports to different countries worldwide, to support the German and European investments worldwide, and to support the raw material deliveries to Germany. So this is our mandate. It's very easy, and normally we have only one product, long-term financing, mostly with ECA covered. And you have already mentioned this instrument, and nowadays this is a very good opportunity to finance long-term projects, CapEx-intensive projects. And today we are speaking about trade and investment opportunities for Uzbekistan, and I think Uzbekistan has now very great opportunity and very great mix of these financing possibilities, because we see nowadays in Uzbekistan a lot of international financial institutions. I think the most international financial institutions, they are here. That's why Uzbekistan has this great opportunity to attract this finance, which is in some cases subsidized, and is provided with some technical assistance to support their local borrowers. And then we see on the other side a lot of commercial banks like us here. And these commercial banks, they have their niche here as well. And I think this is a real, very good opportunity and very good possibility for Uzbekistan to develop this financing system in different ways. And speaking about the commercial banking, we have, of course, regarding the trade finance opportunities, this documentary business, which you have already mentioned, and then we have ECA business. And then we have, in terms of ECA, we have different opportunities as well. First, you can provide, for example, we as KfW IPEX Bank, we work here in Uzbekistan with local banks. We have now 5 banks in our portfolio, and so we can provide the local companies through this on-lending structure with good financing. This what we call on-lending structure through the local banks. And for example, Asaka Bank is our very esteemed client as well, and we work together. So, and as you may know, there are a lot of instruments in this framework, like OECD consensus and then ECA covered finance. As for us, we can structure this, we can work via banks on lending finance, then we can work with corporates directly, then we can do, of course, this structured and project finance. That's why I think we have nowadays here a lot of instruments to support trade and investments in Uzbekistan. Very important is the point, of course, that we can combine this commercial banking, commercial instruments with the instruments which are coming from international financial organizations. And as for us, we are working together in some projects with IFIs, international financial organizations, and we as commercial banks. And I think it's very good instrument for big project finance. For example, in energy sector or in transport sector, in these very capex intensive sectors. So as for ECA statistic, what we see nowadays, it's well known that Uzbekistan is a very booming economy, and in the last 10 years we see that we have portfolio from ECAs about 6 billion euros, and as for us, as already mentioned, we support the European exports, and we see that, for example, from ECAs, Euler Hermes is very active with their instruments here, with the cover, then SACHA, then BPI France, and SURF. Euler Hermes stands for Germany, SACHA stands for Italy, BPI France for France, SURF for Switzerland. Yeah, as already mentioned, ECA is a good opportunity to enable this longer term financing that the borrower can rely on, for example, 10 or 15 years loan, and can better organize his or her business model. Nowadays, we have another important topic in framework of trade and investment promotion. We all have this topic ESG, or green loans, green bonds, green financing, and this is another good topic for ECAs as well. How can we structure it? How can we do it attractive for borrowers? And nowadays, there are some special programs from ECA side that they have lower requirements for the project where we see these green components. And in this case, we as commercial banks can provide better financing for green projects. Another good topic or good news is that I think in July it would be a new rule from OECD consensus that for green topics, the possibility of coverage for green projects would be possible for longer periods, till 22 years. So I think these are good developments, and once again, combining all these products, we can offer, we all together here, yeah, as international financial institutions, as modern alternative financing institutions, we commercial banks, local banks, commercial local banks, we can offer better financing to promote trade and investment activities here in Uzbekistan. Thank you.
Спасибо, Екатерина, большое. Мы переходим к следующему нашему спикеру.
Go to the next speaker of us.
Назим Нурдали, Chief Operations Officer, Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, Саудовская Аравия.
Okay. Thank you, Barry, for having me here today. I'm glad to be in this forum to talk about trade finance. So I come from the Islamic International Trade Finance Corporation. It's a entity belonging to the Islamic Development Bank Group, and we specialize, as the name is, in trade finance. Since we established, for information, since we established in 2008, now 15 years, we have done almost $70 billion of trade on funded basis, and about 25% of it, 17.7 billion, is on our private sector. But we exist in 2008, but actually the activity of trade finance existed within the bank itself since 1978. And actually, the bank, IDB, I would say, was the first multilateral to do trade finance from its inception. Right? Also, a multilateral started trade finance much later. Why? Because from the very beginning of the IDB, trade was recognized as a critical component for any socio-economic development. So accompanying the trade, facilitating trade, is key to help the countries. We help our member countries, we have about 57 countries around the world, from Asia to South America, through the Gulf area and Africa. And through the trade finance, we're able to complement what IDB do on the project finance, because we do purely short-term finance. In Uzbekistan, for example, or in Central Asia, our portfolio reached around 1.7 billion, but in Uzbekistan it's about $468 million. We do financing. For sovereign financing, we work with banks, local by about 11 banks in the region, in the country, with whom we give line of finance extended for trade. I mean, purely trade finance, import, export. The type of instrument that we use is Islamic finance, but it's related to buyer's credit, supplier credit, structured finance, supply chain finance, and of course, including sort of export finance that we're talking about earlier. So today, what I want to, when we talk about the future of trade finance, I would say, first of all, we are living in a rapidly changing world, right? Things are not what we used to be 3 or 4 years ago, and COVID is one of the accelerators of all the changes, the trigger. And when we look at things nowadays, how trade finance impacted the way we do trade. So things have changed dramatically. So I would say when we look at the future, I think we need to look at it from a 5 perspective. One, from a trade finance, it's challenging, but opportunity will come from the way we look at inclusiveness of trade finance. Secondly, we mentioned about it earlier, about from an I would say ESG perspective, right? Environmental, about green financing. Thirdly, we talk about trade from a KYC perspective, compliance perspective, right? It becomes very important. Fourthly, we talk from a technology perspective, digitalization, mentioned about it. And fifth, we can talk trade finance from a geopolitical tension or perspective that we have all over the world. So first one, the inclusiveness. So we need to be able to bring into trade finance the private sector in the form of micro and SME finance to finance them, to get them access to financing, as well as human entrepreneurs to be part of the inclusion of part of in trade finance. So this is very important in the future because we see more and more, I would say, the requirement for this SME to be involved in to be part of the mainstreaming into the global trade, and this we earlier, as we know, there's some survey done that in the region, 57% of all SME application to bank for financing got rejected, right? Which is much higher than in Asia in general. Why is that so? The mix of issues on supply and demand side. On the demand side, when SME don't have the required documentation, they don't have the collateral, they don't have an audited account, and difficult to make a KYC. For the bank, they have an issue that transaction cost is high to do an SME than do a corporate. So these are issues that face on a daily basis. So how to bring them into mainstream business. So this is what we need to look at solution. That solution is also part of it is come from digitalization. How can bring down the transaction cost and application cost to be reduced. When we talk about compliance now, we know that between 2 to 5% of all money, 2 to 5% of money lended is represent about from global GDP between 2 to 5% estimated. So it's a huge amount of what you call a trade-based money laundering, because trade is being used as a conduit, a channel to do money laundering. So banks have to be more vigilant. And you know, for example, the amount of bank fine that's been put on bank that reached last year, $5 billion. Bank have been fined all over the world because not that lack of vigilance, but those who do fraud are being made much more sophisticated. So bank has, therefore, again, technology has played a role in it. Thirdly, we talk about ESG. More and more, we need to have mainstreaming ESG into our trade finance activities. We talk about green letter of credit and also activities related to environmentally friendly business. So I would say this would be the future. I mean, we can't afford to neglect ESG in our activities. For example, in ITFC, we have a negative pledge. We don't do coal financing. We don't do any import, export of coal finance, we don't do. We do palm oil, but we do only palm oil. We also have certified sustainable palm oil plantation. So this type of transaction that we look at. So we implement it, but there are much more to do. This would be the mainstream in the future, where trade finance has to be taking that into account, to be considered in order for trade finance, for we are bank, what to do. On the point of technology, I mean, our colleague talked already about digitalization. We know all of it. Digitalization of shipping document, digitalization of a letter of credit. We're working on some other platform, like blockchain platform. We also do that. We found that it's more efficient if we can get all the SMEs and corporate to be able to implement some sort of digitalization of the activities so that they can be less costly and more efficient for the bank to consider them for financing. But digitalization would be a must for everybody, and we need to embrace it as a bank, as a financial institution, in order to be able to survive or to react to all other sort of, we call digital banking we talk about, because we are the traditional type of bank. So we want also to take into account that and push forward ourselves to change so that we can adapt to the customer need and bring more efficient transaction to our customers. Lastly, geopolitical tension. We know what happened, for example, Ukraine-Russian conflict. which has a much more spillover effect than the region. It's all over the world. And we being one of the big financing of wheat, all right, we have gone into a challenge last year when so many of our customers or those having LC open for or in favor of Ukraine and Russian suppliers. So what was the big challenge? So it shaped the way of how the customer now is looking for alternative, which is not easy. So during the tension, the Russia, not Russia, China, US war, and other protectionism, all these and other aspects of challenges about how other region, not only in this part of the world, but in Africa, where we have civil war and all that, this impacts our trade and trade finance. And one of the immediate effects we see is volatility of commodity prices. So the theoretical pension has an impact on trade. And nowadays, we're going to live a new normal. Why was that? We have high inflation, low economic growth, low population growth in many countries. We're looking at renewable energy. We're talking about low fuel oil intensity energy production, volatility of commodity prices. All these are impacting our trade, global trade, and this will have an impact, therefore, on a new demand or new normal for demand for goods in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Thank you, Nazim. Next speaker going to be Sardor Almahadov, исполнительный директор подразделения Structured Trade and Export Finance. Банк Helaba, Landesbank. Пожалуйста.
Thank you, Sergey. First of all, thank you very much, organizers, for this opportunity to speak here, to present my bank, and it's a privilege to be here. For me, it has also some personal touch because I'm born and bred in Tashkent, so it's my home city. So it's always good to combine business with private pleasure, so to say. And I represent today our bank, Helaba Landesbank, Landesbank Hessen-Thüringen. Sergey, it's indeed very complicated name. That's why we came up with this brand Helaba, which stands for Hessische Landesbank. We are one of 4 public sector banks in Germany, one of these Landesbanks, which belong to municipalities and like Länder, which is like provinces. And our aim as a bank to support our exporters, which are mainly German banks. We know our roots, but we also support European exports to Uzbekistan. So we work in Uzbekistan not because I'm from Uzbekistan, which you might think, but it's because our customers, they see the surge of interest in Uzbekistan for European technologies and for financing from Europe. So it's imperative for us to work if we want to serve our customers. So it's just a matter of client drive, and we are client-driven banks, so we follow our customers. And I should say Uzbekistan has been since last 6 years in the spot. It's for ECA financing. Why for ECA financing? Because we see a process of huge investments in Uzbekistan, in textile industry, in agriculture, industry, mining, infrastructure, green projects, what Ekaterina mentioned. So, and you can finance these flow of investments, this equipment, technologies, either by using letters of credit and traditional trade finance instruments, which our bank is also doing. You can also tap ECA market. ECA stands for Export Credit Agencies, and it's national export promotion programs. When people ask me why Germany is so successful in exports, of course it has long tradition of small and medium championship, which sell all over the world. They have perfect technology and interesting solutions. But it's only part of the truth. The secret sauce, in my view, is Germany has, first of all, community of banks which finance trade, which love trade finance, which work in places much more riskier than Uzbekistan. So to work in Uzbekistan, it's not that tricky. And you also have Euler Hermes, which is our national export promotion agency, ECA. And whenever we use ECA from Germany, Hermes, or other European countries, we actually replace Uzbekistani risk with German government risk or other European government risk. And it has several advantages. It's not that we do not trust Uzbekistan, it just helps us to multiply our possibilities. So imagine you have a limit of 5 million. With Hermes, you can finance the project up to 100 million because German government takes 95% of your risk from you. They substitute your risk, your borrower in Uzbekistan, with the government. What can be better than your own government for German public sector banks? So we love it. So it multiplies our limits. Second, it's a cost factor, of course. Whenever we finance with ECA, we can offer quite attractive prices, interest rates, because we are actually financing our own governments. You can compare it to government bonds, and so the prices are quite comparable to government bonds. And of course, you can say there is a cost of insurance, but this cost can be also financed by us, so it can be capitalized. So at the end of the day, the all-in cost is quite competitive, especially for such longer tenors. And here I come to the last maybe advantage. It's a long tenors. Ekaterina mentioned green projects with up to 18 years now, and it will be 22 for conventional projects. We finance up to 10 years, sometimes longer, together with the delivery period. So there are no market, unfortunately, not yet in Uzbekistan, no money, long money from pension funds, which you can use as an alternative to finance, let's say, investment projects with amortization period of 10 years with the same tenor of financing tenor. Many clients, they finance it with a short-term instruments, which is not always correct, because we saw this disruption when the war broke out, and many people, they couldn't assess, let's say, the impact of Russian invasion into Ukraine on Uzbekistan. So they start cutting the limits, and there was some disruption. And if you finance your long-term investments with short-term instruments, you can always have the situation that you are out of funds and you have this gap. ECA provides long-term solution. And, but we do not compete against other products. We use LCs, for example, together with IFIs. As you know, ECA covered financing can, it's only for 85% of the project. So 15%, it should be, advance payment should be out of pocket of the borrower. So it cannot be covered by ECA. And because ECAs, they want to see skin in the game of the borrower so that he has some own investments. But we finance also this 15%. And we use IFIs like EBRD, ADB. So we finance not for the same tenor, but we can, in effect, we can finance 100% of the project, 85% being ECA covered loan and 15% LC-based financing for 2-3 years. Depends on availability of the limit. And sometimes we have local costs like construction, infrastructure, which has to be done together with the delivery of equipment. So we can provide bilateral loan for that. So you have a variety of instruments which are complementary to each other and not competing. The market potential in Uzbekistan and the demand for financing is so huge that even we in Germany and other European countries with all our banks, with all our limits, will need to use ECA for the coming years. And actually we see this trend that more and more banks are interested in ECA. Previously it was limited maybe to state-owned banks, now more and more private-owned banks are interested in ECA. We see surge of interest from state-owned enterprises to work directly with banks in Europe, in Germany, and finance their CapEx programs using ECA without local banks, which helps also local banks. I mean, they can finance working capital for these companies. So we work as a team. We are not competing against each other. And And last but not least, we see more and more ECAs working here. Hermes, which I mentioned before, of course, traditionally since 90s was very strong in Uzbekistan. It has a history of relationship. But we see also newcomers like ECAs from Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and which were not here before 6 years ago, so to say. So we as a bank, we support European suppliers, not only German, and we see these flows, and we are happy because the more diversified ECA portfolio you have, it's better. And well, when you talk about advantages, you should also mention the disadvantages, so to say. There is the reverse side of the coin. ECA, as I said, it's national export promotion instruments, so it encourages exports from the country of ECA. So you cannot use Hermes to finance your deliveries or secure your deliveries from China. And even if you have a German exporter, sometimes we are confronted with that. They say, so it's a German company, but we say, yes, but they produce in Turkey or in China for Uzbekistan, so we cannot use Hermes, because Hermes wants to create jobs in Germany, in export jobs in Germany, and promote export out of Germany, and not support this, let's say, export of the jobs to Asia or Middle East. So that's maybe nationalistic, but that's the way the government works. They spend taxpayers' money on that. They lose sometimes on ECA cover. We saw these cases in Kazakhstan. So they have something to lose, so they have their also conditions. So you are limited in terms of sourcing, where you can buy. And another disadvantage, I would say, but it's more like a perception, that ECA-covered loans, they take time. Well, if well prepared, it's just a normal process, but usually when you talk to clients in Uzbekistan, they say, oh, it takes so long. It's true to some extent in complicated projects with environmental impacts. In this case, you need some assessment from external consultant. But usually, we see that well-prepared players, like the banks we work with in Uzbekistan, NBU, Agrobank, Uzprom-Stroybank, and so on, they know how it works, and they're prepared. It works quite efficiently. Even with corporates, we did last year one deal with Uzbekistani state-owned enterprise. It works if prepared well, and we see this trend that the banks, they invest in their employers, they send people to Europe to train them so that they understand this product. And some speakers mentioned that it's also important that banks and corporates, they train their own employees so that they know about such opportunities. And on a final note, I would say that the future for ECA business in Uzbekistan is bright. We will see more Uzbek banks working on ECA deals. We will see more increasingly growing number of corporates, Uzbek corporates, and not only state-owned, but also private one, tapping this market. And we hopefully will see a lot of new ECAs and players, so that the market is not only limited to some European banks, but we will see more and more players from all over the world. Thank you.
Спасибо, Сардор, большое. Я хотел отметить, знаете, я вот модерировал, наверное, десятки.
I was working as a moderator on many different sessions. We have a very cordial session. We have a lot of bankers, but I feel your warm tone and voice, and thank you very much for this. Thank you to all the speakers, and I think now I'd like to give the floor to our next speaker, Mr. Kuretila Tsuganov, chairman of Asaka Bank. Yes, thank you very much, and I would like to greet all the participants, and this topic is very interesting for our discussion. I'm speaking about trade financing, and it's very important, and Asaka Bank in Uzbekistan is in top of the biggest banks, and we have very strong positions in trade financing, and that's why we are invited to take part in this discussion. And now I'll speak about this topic, and we see that there are a lot of reforms, and a lot of reforms have been implemented, and we can see that from the macroeconomical perspective, the economy is growing, and the business is growing in general, and the demand is growing. That's why in trade financing, that's why trade financing plays an important role. Studies show that one third of all the assessments are done through trade financing, and this tool enables us here in Uzbekistan to our banks to increase their positions in banking sphere, and more banks are trying to take steps forward and expand their activities, and this is very important topic for banks. And even from the perspective of our bank, annual growth of trade financing is about 25%, and this is a minimum. And sometimes it peaks to 30%. And a lot have been mentioned, and a lot of speakers spoke about geopolitical situation, other issues on the global market in general. Yes, of course, there are a lot of challenges, and today we have, we can say that financing resources are becoming more expensive, and of course that makes our clients to find new markets, and we as banks, we need to find new sources for financing, for funding, and new mechanisms of financing in order to suggest it to offer to our clients. And I would like to thank our bank partners. We are actively working with them, and we are having a lot of negotiations, and we having discussions what can we offer to each other, to our clients. And of course banking are growing and developing new mechanisms of financing, but at the same time important role is played to international financial institutes like EBRD, IDB, and many others, because these financial institutes gives us a possibility not only to have trade financing, but they have long-term financing for infrastructural projects. And we understand that without infrastructure, business cannot grow, cannot function. And this is we have a multiple effect, and we have more and more growth of trade financing because of this, and this makes it possible for us to work in this direction. And I think as a new mechanism I can speak about such things that recently very actively expert insurance agencies, and Sardar was speaking about them, and for today expert insurance agencies started to offer trade financing directly to banks without third-party banks, and they provide direct financing, and this makes other players of the market to think about this, because competitiveness is growing, and competition inside Uzbekistan is growing, because banking area is growing, and we have more and more new players, and of course we have a very big competition, and we compete for each client, and we are trying to work very actively. And Asaka Bank is very open for this. We are open to discuss new mechanisms, new directions, new spheres in trade financing. And the most important, I would like to thank all of our banking partners. And it was mentioned that we train our employees, our colleagues in this sphere. And I would like to say that for today, an important role is played to provide awareness of business in Uzbekistan, to increase awareness of development of business. And today, together with EBRD, we are working on development of some kind of platform to increase literacy of our businessmen. And this platform will be launched in the nearest future, and this will be a good move forward to increase trade financing. This is all what I wanted to say, and I'm open to all the questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have some time. If we and I see there is a question. Could you please pass microphone to? Good evening. I'm a founder of a IT company, and I'm working there for more than 20 years. And in Uzbekistan, we opened an office, and for me it was very interesting to listen to our speakers and speakers from banking sphere. And if we look to statistics, unfortunately the sound is very poor. We see 34% of account receivables and 12%. Unfortunately, the sound is very poor. And when we speak about account receivables between companies, and private companies like insurance companies who work on local market.
I'm very sorry, but we don't have a sound here, so we cannot hear what the participant is saying. We apologize for this.
You know, it's not a question, it's like a small presentation. Yeah, when you speak about presentation, about brand, because brand, it's a huge word. It's not a logo. It's association. If you speak about the BMW, you understand what this company makes. When you speak about Mercedes or British Airways, it's clear for you. And of course, we need to work in such a way, and access to financing is of course very important, and all that I'm saying is quite obvious. I understand it, and maybe in Uzbekistan it's like in many countries, personal attitude is very important, and you all know it very well. And when you speak about international trade, not everyone know everything, not everyone realizes, and that's why it's very good to have a look to our partners' work. And special thanks to your word, competitiveness. And this is I'm saying in conclusion, because I see there is another speaker with a microphone. But I'm speaking about advertisement and associations with companies, and this is that I'm working in this sphere only for 32 years, and for this 32 years I have seen this trend. Okay, now the floor is yours, please. I'm representative from. The sound is very poor, unfortunately. Он пропадает. Even during the pandemic, we could increase our export for about 10%. Квакает, да? Export is growing, and we need financing for export operations, for trade operations. And we met with Chalabals, and we have a textile enterprise that has funding from ECA, from ECA, and today our enterprises and our banks, we have more than 30 banks that work in our market, and these are big banks, and they previously were state-owned banks, but we have a conventional system of credit, and we are seeking for new mechanisms of financing. And under the association of Singapore companies, we are developing a new platform, that a new marketplace that will allow us to implement a new mechanism on receivables. And when but we should speak not only about financing, but about management of money, not only financing. May I interrupt you? You raised the question, but started to give a presentation. Of course, it's very interesting, but let's we have social networks. I'm speaking not about information, not about press release. Let's comment what we speak about during the forum, because a lot of people have many questions. So you have been spoken about your sphere, and and you have executed a lot of activities, and this is very very good. We have very cordial, friendly atmosphere. We are like relatives to each other. But I have to just give the floor to another person. Ekaterina will be able to answer all the questions after the session. Please give the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much. It's a good question, but let's speak about this in details after the discussion. We can speak about this after discussion. So we now we are having formal relations. This is very good. So. I'm a representative of European Association on Renewable Energy, and I will speak Russian because even German representatives speak Russian, so it means I also can speak Russian. So I would like to know two things. I would like to thank Mr. Polander for because he was speaking about the importance of educational projects, educational platform, and I have a question to you, Sardor. You all are representatives of distinguished banks. You were speaking about projects that we have, and your projects are really huge. And we heard about banking business, and our moderator is speaking about this. And what's the minimum that you have? In our association, a minimum is low, and how can we have those resources that you were speaking about?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a very good question. If we talk about the ECA, and I'm gonna reply into Russian. All the German banks, we speak Russian. We all have our max and minimum credit line, and we give it like go to the on our perspectives as well. If we talk about the Helaba Bank, we have a look on the project. We have a look at the project, 10 million project, 10 million euro. If we see the project about less than 2 or 3 millions, we just let our friends to have a look under this. It's not like they're saying like the small parts of money ECO will cover, ICA will cover. It's but for the long-term projects we need bigger amount of money. And if we talk about the 100 million project, it will be 5 years. We can also do the accredited for the IDRB and ABC. But it will be much faster and much shorter. If we talk about the 10 millions, only in our bank, we have a look only of the project on 10 million, starting for 10 millions for ICA. If we talk of Hermes, we do that for the experts. They do all kind of expert. They also have lots of kind of different projects, even for the 1 million. And this is also the question is not all the banks will try to support this kind of loans. I hope I answer your question. Thank you very much. Only one. And if we compare the German import and others, and compare the Saudi Arabia as well, I hope so that the banks who represent the Chinese exporters, not only Chinese, there's also European banks as well in the China region. We also see in China, in India, there are instruments similar with it. First of the ECA was organized in United Kingdom, and they also copied from it. We also see in the Kazakh partners. We see the countries who want to increase their. They also want to implement this ecosystem, ICA system into their countries, and they go for the insurance or from the different parts, and so they try to and all the countries who are thinking to develop their country, they will also they are thinking about they need their own ECA. Thank you very much. And it will be one more question. Maybe it will be the last question. Hello, I'm Nisal Sultanov. I'm the director of IC Energy. The regeneration, is there a component for this? And we also have a project. We have a different kind of projects. Also start from 1 million and up. Do we have sources to have a funding from these projects? Who we can contact with these projects, so we will have a more detailed information about all of this, about funding. And we also represent the Rolls-Royce company. And also we are one of the exporters of these products as well. So basically they want to know the contract. Oh, the IC Energy. Okay, look, if you have a project in structured all this project one by one by the project, and she want to know about the structure of her business. And if you want to take the loan on your own risk, or you dividing your project each by individual. We divide it into the big or small projects as well. For example, we build a big energy system, and we work like an ESCO, and they need the financing. Who can we contact with all these questions of financing? And also, yeah, the question is how the small companies can ask for a funding, and also from the international ones and banks. If it's we talk about not a big amount of money, you should contact the local banks. So because they know the local business, local market, and not all the world banks have their own office in Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, whatever, and they cannot help you out with consulting. It's the easiest way is to go to the local bank, and like Kudratullah said, there's also a huge spectrum of cooperation with the big financial organizations, worldwide organizations. So I'm sorry, Kudratullah, I'm urging you, and you can come to Osaka Bank and say, I have this kind of project and I need your support, and show them the plan of all your roadmap, and that you want funding from all the different kind, from Islamic Bank or from the UK. Not because it's a local bank. They also have the site of the information for all these different kind of banking, and they can lead you to the bank you need. So it will be wise move from you that you come to your local bank and ask for the funding. And ask them for support and what you can give us for this, and what kind of programs do you have, and with our project, do you have any suggestion for us? Well, but if you go to the German commercial, but what we don't know, does the Citibank does this? It's about the trade financing system. We have the same line as Osaka Bank, the local bank, and with this line we can choose by our property. So we can just have a look not only for 10 million and up, but we can just have a look on a small amount of funding as well. There is no universal answer for your question. Thank you very much. I'll just do some comments about this.
We specialize in financing SMEs. And this can be a difficult area for banks, but we work with local banks in Tashkent. So if anyone wants advice or arranging export or import finance at small sums, I'm your man.
Thank you very much.
Но вот на этом я и хотел закончить нашу сессию, чтобы быть вовремя. Но с другой стороны, буквально несколько слов говоря, я очень рад, что у нас закончилось на таком позитивном, простом призыве, что международный бизнес, он уже, во-первых, в Узбекистане, а бизнес Узбекистана, в принципе, он смотрит не просто вдаль, да, а смотрит на международные рынки и в плане экспорта, и в плане инвестиций. Поэтому я не знаю, как вы, я этому очень рад. И мне кажется, действительно есть изменения. И я вначале говорил слова благодарности за то, что вы говорите, и намекнул за то, что вы делаете, да, поэтому и за то, что вы делаете, за то, что вы говорите, как президент говорил на пленарной сессии. Большое вам спасибо. Большое спасибо всем участникам. Увидимся через год или раньше. Кто-то завтра уже, да, встречается, кто-то после сессии. Поэтому еще раз больших успехов всем. Спасибо.
Со спикерами можно мне, да?
Да, мне совершенно помочь вам чем-нибудь? Да, конечно, конечно. Thank you very much.